Hello, everybody. This is Mr. Yen, and these are the video notes for lesson 7.3, where we're going to be talking about listing the congruences between two figures. So let's pull up the worksheet. Okay, so you'll need this 7.3 worksheet. You can pick that up from Google Classroom or wherever your teacher has left it for you. And to fill out this worksheet, you can print it out and fill it out by hand. You can fill it out electronically on the computer and submit it that way. Or if you write all of your answers on a separate piece of paper and clearly mark the problem numbers, that's fine too. Okay, remember that congruent is like the mathematical way of saying the same, exactly the same. And we can say that two figures, so like two types of shapes, two polygons, are congruent if all of their corresponding angles and sides are congruent. Corresponding is like matching. So another way of thinking about this is if every single part of the two figures are the same, then those two figures are congruent. And we can tell by the way that the figures are marked what the corresponding parts are. So here we have two triangles. And then if I look at angle A over here, angle A has two marks through it like that. Then I can look at the next triangle here, and the same angle that also has two marks through it is this one right here. So what this is telling me is that angle A is congruent to angle D. Next is we're looking at angle B. So that has one mark through it here. And if I look at the next triangle, angle E is the one that also has one mark through it like that. So I can conclude that angle B is congruent to angle E. Next, if I'm looking at angle C, that has three marks through it here. So on this triangle here, angle F is the angle with three marks through it. So I know that angle C is congruent to angle F. I can do the same thing with sides. So side AB, so that's going from A to B, that's this one right here. That's congruent to the side that also has one mark through it like that. So this has one mark through it. So I know that side AB is congruent to side ED, or DE, yeah, right here. Now something about sides is when you're listing sides, the best way to do it is to write the two letters of the endpoints and put a line over it like that, because it's a line segment. On the printout, I don't have the lines above the letters because I'm not sure how to do that on the computer, but you can add it in just like that. Okay, now let's look at side BC. BC, okay, that's going between these two endpoints, and I can see that it has three marks through it like that. So then I look for the side with three marks through it on the other side. Okay, so that's side EF. And then I can do the same thing for side CA. Side CA, that's here. And it has two lines through it like that. So then that matches up with this side here that also has two lines through it, like this. And so that would be, so CA is the same as FD. And then listing the two triangles, triangle ABC is congruent to triangle, and this is where order matters. Since angle A is congruent to angle D, that means D needs to be the first letter that I write. Angle B was congruent to angle E, so E has to be the second letter that I write. Last one, C, angle C is congruent to angle F, so F has to be the last letter that I write. Triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. Now that we've done that example, I'm going to have you do problems 2 and problem 3 on your own. I'm going to move ahead to problem number 4 on the second page. So I'm looking at the second page of this 7.3 worksheet now. In these problems, you're going to be given triangles, and each triangle, you have 3 parts that are congruent. They can be angles or they can be sides. And depending on what 3 parts are congruent, there are different terms you can use to describe the criteria of the triangle. You might be given 3 sides that are congruent, in which case you can say there's 3 congruent sides. You might be given 2 sides and then an angle that's congruent in between those 2 congruent sides. If that's the case, we call this 2 sides and an included angle, and angles in between the 2 sides. You might have 2 sides and then a congruent angle that's only touching one of the sides, but not both of the sides. We call that 2 sides and a non-included angle. The angle is not in between the 2 sides. You might be given 3 congruent angles. You might be given 2 angles that are congruent, and then a side that's congruent in between the 2 angles. So we call that 2 angles and an included side because the side is touching both angles. Or you might have 2 congruent angles and then a congruent side that's only touching one of the angles, in which case we call that 2 angles and a non-included side. The side is not in between the 2 angles. Okay, let's look at number 4 now. In number 4, we have 3 parts. So I'm going to start by listing the given congruences. Given congruences is the congruence, only the congruences that we know from the markings, not all of them. I know that angle B up here with 2 lines through it, 2 arcs through it, is congruent to angle S because it also has 2 arcs through it. So I'll say angle B is congruent to angle S. Next, I want to list the part that's touching angle B or next to angle B. So in that case, the next piece of information is this side, which is congruent to this side here. So I'll say that side BA is congruent to side SR. And then the last piece of information, next to this side is this congruent angle, which matches up with this congruent angle. So I can say angle A is congruent to angle R. And here for criteria, I have 2 angles that are congruent and then a side that's in between the 2 angles. It's touching the 2 angles. So I go back here, that's going to be 2 angles with a side in the middle, this one. 2 angles and an included side, that's the criteria that's given for these 2 triangles. It's the criteria that they share. So I can say 2 angles and an included side. Okay, and so that's what you are going to do for the remainder of those problems, 4 through 9. Okay, that's all from me. And with that, I will say goodbye and good luck. Take care.